Podéis sentaros.
Que estoy acá.
Sí,
Sí.
aquí estás muy bien. Pues puedes incluso llevarlo de mano, ¿no? Así se mueve. Ah, ok. Correcto.
Sí, y podemos quitar eso.
Sí. A ver, yo no sé si soy capaz de hacerlo. Buenos días. Mientras terminan de poner los micros a nuestros ponentes, voy a ir dando inicio. Buenos días, gracias por estar aquí. La Fundación Mies van der Rohe persigue, entre otros, un objetivo fundamental, que es la promoción de la cultura arquitectónica de base, acercando a ciudadanos, niñas, niños, visitantes y barceloneses al conocimiento y disfrute de los placeres de la buena arquitectura, sin olvidar en paralelo estimular la reflexión crítica sobre la producción arquitectónica. El Premio de Arquitectura Contemporánea de la Unión Europea, Premio Mies van der Rohe, resulta un elemento estratégico para promover desde Barcelona una arquitectura de calidad concebida con rigor para satisfacer las necesidades de la sociedad. Para ello, necesitamos involucrar a los ciudadanos y a las instituciones públicas, ampliar la difusión del premio más allá de los circuitos arquitectónicos y de esta manera potenciar la capacidad de interacción de la arquitectura con todos los actores sociales en el ámbito europeo. El periodismo de calidad resulta para ello un aliado imprescindible, necesario, en nuestro objetivo de transmitir a los ciudadanos y a las instituciones el valor añadido que la arquitectura puede aportar en sus entornos domésticos, urbanos y sociales. Esta primera Conferencia Europea de Arquitectura y Medios se concibe como un lugar para reunirse e intercambiar experiencias sobre la difusión de la arquitectura. Está dirigida a periodistas, instituciones y organizaciones culturales, profesionales de la comunicación, arquitectos y amantes de la arquitectura. Charlas, debates, talleres tienen lugar ayer con la primera sesión y hoy en el marco de la Semana de Arquitectura de Barcelona. Architecture and the Media está organizado con el apoyo de Creative Europe como parte del programa de difusión del Premio de Arquitectura Contemporánea de la Unión Europea, Premio Mies van der Rohe. Agradecemos también el apoyo en este evento de Acción Cultural Española, la BO, Eden Speakerman, Storydata, Moritz y el Hotel Alma Barcelona, así como nuestros patrocinadores Fundació Banc de Sabadell y Simón. El comisariado de la conferencia está a cargo de Míriam Giordano, consultora de comunicación y directora de la agencia de comunicación Labo, y Eva Porevska, arquitecta y editora en jefe de Arquitectura Murator, a quien agradezco especialmente el impulso inicial, sin el cual este proyecto no existiría, y a quien cedo ahora la palabra. Gracias por haber venido. Eva.
Just few words for the beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it was 2004 when the new owner of the publishing house I have been working for asked me to join the management. I wasn't convinced to the idea because this character of job has never been my ambition. This publishing house have radio, TV, daily and so on. But his main argument was that I am an architect, and in his opinion, it means a person with innovative ideas. True or not? Nice how people see our profession, isn't it? As a consequence, I spent 14 years working as an architect-in-chief of Architectural Magazine, combining with responsibility for many different magazines. And this job influenced my vision of media, also architectural media. So we will talk about changes, but I just want to show you some trends that are, in my opinion, very important at the moment. Can I have the first slide, please? Not this one. This one, yes. Okay. This diagram shows the development of media over the years. It is prepared by a Sweden company. So we can see that on time it was only print. Then we can see the growth of diversity. 10 years ago, hooray! It was the situation that seemed stable. And what about future? We can see only Facebook and Google. True or not? It makes you wonder. And the next, please. Yes. Let's look at this diagram. Internet is growing. And what about magazines? 3 times less. Dailies, the same. Next slide. So, dailies going down. Next. Magazines, nothing to say. So, it was about Poland, but the situation is the same everywhere. So, where and how write about architecture? That's the question. There is our effort, and I hope that we will talk about this also today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to be here today with these great speakers that we had also yesterday, and I'm very happy also that you can attend. A great thanks to the Ms. van der Rohe's Foundation to make this conference possible, and to Eva to be curator with me. I would just want to explain how will be the organization of today. We will have 3 panels divided in newspapers, magazines, and digital. Of course, the separation is questionable. We know that there are no boundaries nowadays between the different kind of media, but this was just to organize the discussion. And in the afternoon, we will have a workshop starting at 3:30 until 7. That is more a practical exercise for people who are interested to discover where is the public of people of us interested in dissemination of architecture. And at night, there will be the closing conference at 8 p.m. that it will be held by Story Data, and it will be a big data analysis on architecture news published in the last 4 years in Spanish and Catalan media. And the data come from COAC and CESCAE Media Archive. So I hope you will be able also to book your agenda for this night. So let's start with the newspapers panel. I'll present you briefly the speakers, and I mean the daily press is among all the different types of media that devotes articles and reportage to architecture is probably considered the most prestigious and influential, especially when it comes to launching criticisms against poorly managing building processes, condemning political malpractice, or presenting the new gurus of the sector. One of the reasons for this is that newspapers are read by the general public, of course. And digitalization of printing press, along with new business models, changed the panorama. So we would like to listen by your experience, which is the editorial line of your media, your newspaper, and telling something to us. So we have here Edwin Heathcote, can start English writer and designer. He is the architecture and design critic of the Financial Times. He's the author of dozens of books, and he has written for many important magazines and journals such as GQ Magazine, L'Architecture d'Aujourd'hui, Icon, and Apollo. We have with us Paola Pierotti, partner of Pipan, former Il Sole 24 Ore, journalist and architect. Pierotti has been jury for many national and international architectural awards. She has also chaired events and sustainable innovation and energy efficiency within the built environment. Currently, she works as editor for Pipan the Brief, and Pantographo. And we have with us Freddy Massad, architect and critic. He graduated the Faculty of Architecture, Design and Urbanism at University of Buenos Aires. Professor, writer and curator. He's currently architecture critic of the Spanish newspaper ABC, collaborating also with different international media specialized in architecture and design. Since March 2013, he has been in charge of La Viga en el Ojo, the architecture blog of the ABC digital edition. And we have also with us Catalina Serra, who is responsible for the cultural section of our newspaper. And we close the panel. So I give the floor now to Edwin.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Do I need to do anything to prompt it? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Rem Koolhaas inevitably came up a little bit. Is my mic on? No. It's on? Okay. Koolhaas inevitably came up last night because he is the most consistently interesting voice in architecture. So I thought, as a success, I was asked to present here one article that I thought was a success, one that I thought was a failure. I started off thinking this was the success, but I'm actually going to reinterpret that and say that this was my failure. This was an article. I went to see a building by Koolhaas, met him on site, and said, let's have a talk. Let's go and have a coffee, talk about the building. I'll write it down. I write up the piece. He said, Jesus, that's so boring. You're going to do this. You're going to do this review. Then you're going to do another review. Then you're going to go and see another building. And he had 4 buildings opening in a month: the Qatar National Library, the Anticipation Lafayette in Paris, the Prada Foundation, and something I can't even remember the 4th. So he said, why don't we sit down and talk about this whole architecture thing, because it's a problem. So this was Rem criticizing me in an article. It's a kind of double, triple, very postmodern narrative where he has a go at me for who I cover. So this is in a way, in a nutshell, it's the problem we have. We're attracted to the most interesting people, and our editors at the newspapers, they want the most interesting people in architecture. Rem is probably, when he talks at least, the most interesting person in architecture, because he doesn't just talk about himself, he talks about big ideas. Most architects talk about their buildings, maybe a little bit about the public space around them and the contribution they're making, but broadly, they're completely self-centered. Rem is talking about the countryside. He has this big exhibition opening at the Guggenheim. He's thinking about where the city is going. He's arrogant, he's painful, he's difficult, but he is willing to tackle the big ideas. And as was brought up last night, he started off as a journalist. So he's kind of doubly appealing to journalists because he knows exactly what we're looking for. So he says outrageous things. So he supplies us with this perfect quote. This is the piece. Now, the reason I say the reason I thought originally that this was a success is to get an 8-page spread in the FT magazine on a Saturday for architecture is an unbelievable coup. Architecture sits rather in a strange position in the media. It's culture, so it sits on the culture pages, but it's only there in a kind of marginal way. If there's an art exhibition opening, it's reviewed as an art exhibition. If an opera or a play opens, it's reviewed as an opera or a play. Architecture, if a good building opens, that's not quite enough. It needs to be a good building that is somehow allied to another part of culture. So it needs to be an opera house, a museum, some kind of grand public statement. Otherwise people say, well, why would we read about a new square in Cyprus? What's interesting about a new sidewalk in Panama? You know, where's the sexiness? You know, the picture editor will ask me. So we're kind of stuck. We're there, but we always get the architecture critics, I think, always get the feeling that that their critiques are tolerated on the culture pages rather than kind of, viscerally encouraged. Having said that, of course, I'm very privileged that there aren't many full-time broadsheet architecture critics left, so I'm extremely grateful to the FT for having me at all. But anyway, this, we'll say, is my failure, this magazine piece, which is one of the biggest pieces I've ever got into the paper, because it's completely predictable. It's about a superstar, a white male, predictable superstar who was a former journalist, who is a kind of the king of the architecture scene. In a way, there's no challenge in getting that into a newspaper. I haven't got any more. Are there 2 more slides? You don't? Cool, that's fine, that's perfect. So this, I'm going to say, is one of my successes. I persuaded the newspaper to run a series of pieces on street furniture and things that appear in the public realm. This was one on newsstands, so it's a kind of slightly meta. In a way, it's always easier to convince the newspapers to write about themselves. This is a kind of gateway drug. But there it is. This is the kind of what newsstands do, what the disappearance of newsstands does. And in a way, it was a piece about how the city is read. So the newsstand becomes a way of reading the city. People hang around, they look at the headlines. If you're a tourist, you don't have to understand the language. You look at what the media is available on the street, and you can begin to, you think at least, you can begin to understand the city, what interests people. And I was interested in what the disappearance of newsstands does to cities. If all the news is online, if it's ephemeral, it's suddenly not engaged. The news is suddenly not engaged with the streetscape, which seemed to me a kind of real loss. I'm sorry, one more slide, last slide. Oh, that's it, that's okay. And this one was about sidewalks.